Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching Off the Beaten Track, a program in which we try to take an in-depth look about a particular issue. We are not going to be taking up a very pleasant issue today. Just a few hours before I decided to invite today's guest, read in the papers that in one of the suburbs of the national capital region, a Urdu teacher, a Urdu tutor, in fact, to be more precise, was going up to teach his student, at which point a resident of the society joined in and said, "Will you shout Jai Shri Ram?" The tutor said, "There is no need for me to shout Jai Shri Ram." That resident was joined by another resident, and the two of them heckled this person and said, "Shout Jai Shri Ram if you want to go and teach your student." Eventually, the man did not shout Jai Shri Ram. There was no need for him to, and he was heckled and pushed out of the society, not able to teach his student that evening. In a town called Uttarkashi, there has been violence against a so-called mosque which has been illegally constructed. Now, the local police as well as the media has taken out documents which prove that this mosque had a construction clearance documents dating all the way to 1969. In another town in Chamoli of Uttarakhand again, some days ago, the Traders Association passed a resolution saying that Muslims from the town must vacate the locality and get out of their shops. Now, what is happening is that we are hearing more and more of these individual targeting of Muslims. In fact, one can say that this has become some kind of a new normal. So, what does this show about our country? What does this? Where does this take us to? Now, we got to discuss all these issues because it is not very, very comfortable situation to see one lot of our citizens being constantly targeted. So, I am going to be talking to Hilal Ahmed, who is a noted academic and a commentator on contemporary issues. I have spoken to him previously on this program. We are going to be talking about the state of Muslims in today's India. Importantly, a few months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, Hilal Ahmed also came out with a very fine book called A Brief History of the Present, Muslims in New India. It's a fairly intriguing title at one level, A Brief History of the Present. So what is the present? The present is, we are talking about the Muslims in New India. New India, as we know, is a coinage of the Prime Minister of India. Muslims in New India, what is the history? How have we actually come to this kind of a situation? Welcome to this program, Hilal Bhai. It's always a pleasure to speak to you on record and also off record. Today we are going to be speaking on record. Welcome to this program.
Thank you, Nilanjan. Thank you very much for having me.
We are talking about these attacks, which is basically saying that Muslims must invisibilize themselves. The tutor that I referred to, who was there in the lift, got targeted because he, quote unquote, looked a Muslim. Might have had a beard, might have been wearing clothes which identified him, as a Muslim, or maybe some other physical mark. I wouldn't really, maybe a cap, skull cap, whatever it could be. How do you look at this pressure to invisibilize yourself all the time? I ask you this question as both a part of the community which is against the politics of communalism and also the fact that you are a Muslim. You have an identity which you cannot hide, and in fact, which you do not feel the need to hide.
Absolutely.
I would like to hear from you. How does the community and individuals deal with it?
First of all, if you ask me personally, that because I live in Delhi and I love to travel in Delhi metro.
That's
Over
right.
the years, whenever a Muslim calls me on my mobile phone and say Assalamu alaikum, I would always hesitate to say Walaikum Assalam. It shows that the moment I would say Walaikum Assalam, many eyes would turn towards me and look at me because I do not look like a normal Muslim. I don't wear skull cap. I don't have beard, and I usually wear Western clothes. So it means that the pressure on identity is actually very, very high. Having said that, but I'm not going to, glamorize it, or, I'm not going to make it that everything has gone,
Or
etc.
fish for sympathy.
Yes, what I would like to, and the introductory remarks you made, I think the idea of invisibilization needs to be understood in its own perspective. And there are two levels at which we can think of invisibilization of Muslims. One is direct political, and second is social. Now, I would come to the political later because that's the field on which I research on. But the social is actually very, very important. What has actually happened in last 10 years that the success of BJP and the silent of non-BJP parties have created an environment in which invisibilization of Muslims has become normal. Now, why? Because if you look at when we say social, and especially in northern India, social mean the area where you interact socially with different group of people. Now, that area has been captured systematically by Hindutva forces in a very significant manner. Now, I'll give you one example, that is Ramlila. All
Hmm.
Ramlila committees are now some way or the other associated with VHP in Delhi and NCR. It shows that now a very specific kind of Hinduism is promoted and propagated in the name of religion. And if that is the case, then it would become very difficult for an individual to think otherwise. Because religion are always given to you in a package, and if that is the dominant package and no one other is questioning that dominant package, then it is natural for people to think that this is the religion of Hindu. This is called Hinduism. And in this Hinduism, it is inevitable to actually criticize Muslim in order to assert your individual identity. So that is one reason why the social sphere has become very vicious. One. There is another reason, and that is the decline of the social. If you look at, we have, when we think of social, do not think of social entirely in relation to Hindu and Muslims, because social is a sphere where we all live. Look at the nature of violence in our society, and that violence shows that actually at the societal level, at the family level, people are not caring for each other. So if a Hindu is not caring for Hindu, why would we expect that the Hindu is going to care for Muslim? So having
Hmm.
that said, because the dominant narrative of politics is nationalism, and that too in a Hindutva manner, so it is natural, it would become natural for asserting one's own religious and political identity or national identity in that way. When you force someone to shout Jai Shri Ram in a lift, and that, suppose if I were there, I would say, okay, fine, I would say Jai Shri Ram, but you have to tell me what is the meaning of Jai Shri Ram. And I might be get into an argument of some kind. But that is not possible for someone who is actually a normal human being. So I
Right.
think that one part of it, that our social is so contaminated and so destroyed, and there is a need to think of social very, very carefully. Remember that during national movement, that social
Hmm.
was the area where all the political leaders of all kinds would intervene and try to adjust themselves in the social. Gandhi and Prabhat Pheri were very good
Right.
example. When communists were there, communists invented a lot of things in order to declass, to mobilize people. So that has completely gone. In the social, what is left is Hindutva and nationalism. And because non-BJP parties do not have the advantage of having something called RSS, because RSS is very active at the ground level. They have access to people at the bottom level of society, and they try to mobilize them in order to provide us logical support to BJP. Other political parties are not interested, and that's the reason why there is a big vacuum, and that vacuum is actually creating all sort of a problem which we encounter now.
Right. You were talking about that is the social aspect, and in the political, that you are saying that the non-BJP parties are not doing it. In fact, they are worried extremely that if they get in and try to intervene, they might actually be upsetting the Hindu voter, and they would not be getting, getting their votes. I remember a remark made by Sonia Gandhi meeting of the Congress party in which she said that unfortunately the Congress has a pro-Muslim party. Now, from a situation where Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and various other leaders in the past, said, that it is not actually a crime to speak on behalf of the minorities. Gandhi used to say this also, as also the common discourse after independence, that yes, we have to actually speak on behalf of the people who are, targeted and more relatively underprivileged. From there, we have come to a situation which is completely different. Now, moving on, we will dwell on two things. One is that since also talking in your book about various issues which are confronted by the average Muslim in today's Hindutva dominated discourse. The Lok Sabha elections are over.
Mm.
The BJP is where it is primarily on the shoulders of the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation for a temple in Ayodhya. One of the most important slogans used to be that ये तो बस झांकी है मथुरा काशी बाकी है. This is just the beginning. Mathura and Kashi are remaining.
Mm.
So the beginning has been accomplished.
Mm.
In January this year, the temple was formally inaugurated and consecrated, if you actually like to use the word, by no one else but the Prime Minister, a gentleman who holds a constitutional post.
Mm.
So now we are talking about developments which has happened through the campaign period and even afterwards about Varanasi and about Mathura. Legal developments are taking place on that.
Mm.
Before getting on to the mosque dispute, let me get into another major issue, which is that during the Ayodhya agitation, one of the important slogans was depicting the Muslims as Babur ke aulad,
Mm.
the progenies of Babur.
Mm.
Aurangzeb is now very consciously and more powerfully used as a hate symbol by the Hindutva forces.
Mm.
In your book, you also talk about the problematic nature of Aurangzeb and how the Hindutva forces on one side and how the, I would say, a more uh, argumentative section of the secularists are also presenting Aurangzeb.
Mm. Mm.
I would like to understand from you that how you see Aurangzeb in this entire backdrop of the Gyanvapi mosque, the demand for its demolition, the fact that on its basement now
Mm.
Hindu prayers are going on for the last several months. How do you look
Yeah.
at all this?
Uh, First of all, I think we have to. I think there are three questions in it.
Yes.
One is, which is a bigger question, that is history question. That how should we look
Aurangzeb.
at the Muslim past?
Okay.
So would always make a distinction between past and history. So past is very huge thing, and history is just a just a vintage point to enter into it to understand it. So there could be many histories to understand the past, but there are some other ways by which you can make sense of the past. For instance, memories, narratives, etc. That distinction is very important because history, the manner in which a certain kind of history is given to us, uh, you know we have somehow internalized it. We think of the past as if it is an extension of the present in which we live. So for example, if you ask a person who is actually fairly well educated and look at and ask him about India's past, he would say there was an ancient India, which was Hindu. He would say there was a medieval India that was Muslim, and then the British India, and then finally in modern India. This classification is actually very, very problematic because this classification was given to us by our colonial masters. And we
Yes.
have somehow imbibed this classification in which, in a way that we believe that the medieval India was actually a Muslim ruled India, which is absolutely wrong because the nature of state was very different than the state which we have. Aurangzeb or Shivaji were not the elected leaders. There
That's
was no
right.
democracy. There was no right to vote. So Shivaji was always a warlord, and Aurangzeb was also of that of also he was also a prince. Now, if that is the case, then we have to understand the placing of Aurangzeb and, for that matter, Muslim history in the political realm of the contemporary India. Now, the figure of Aurangzeb is very interesting. And then that's the reason why in my book, I actually try to look at Muslim perception and Muslim imagination of Aurangzeb over the years. What is interesting is that actually Muslim League was not interested in the figure of Aurangzeb because they said that Aurangzeb and both Aurangzeb and Akbar actually failed character.
Hmm.
Akbar tried to harmonize the relationship with Hindus, he failed.
That's right.
And Aurangzeb was actually trying to destroy Hindu temples, and he was actually somehow tried to force Hindus to accept Islam, etc. They also said that he also failed. What we need is representative government and representation of Muslim, and that could only be given by the British rule. And that is the resolution passed by the Muslim League in 1909.
That's right.
So that is one image of Aurangzeb. Then there is another image of Aurangzeb, and that is, you find in Urdu literature, where Aurangzeb's all sins which he committed were also seen as problem. But at the same time, it is also realized that at the end of his life, he became a Sufi, etc. And that's why he was actually, he somehow realized that he made a few mistakes. So again, there is a problematic aspect associated with Aurangzeb.
Hmm.
And finally, if you go to people and talk to people in Delhi, because I belong to Delhi, in whole my life, I have met only two or three people whose name is Aurangzeb. So it
Right.
means people don't name their children Aurangzeb. What does it mean? It means that the figure of Aurangzeb is actually not accepted. And I would also like to add here that there is a Sufi whose name was Sarmat Shahid, and his mazar is just opposite Jama Masjid. And Maulana Azad
In
was
Delhi.
very fond of Sarmat, and he wrote an essay in Urdu on Sarmat Shahid. And if you read that essay, you realize that Maulana Azad was also very critical of Aurangzeb. So you can see that the figure of Aurangzeb is actually never become a prominent symbol for doing Muslim politics of any kind. But somehow, Hindutva, and if you read the discovery of India, you find that Nehru is equally critical of Aurangzeb as well. So therefore, the figure of Aurangzeb was somehow imposed on Muslims as if that they are celebrating Aurangzeb in order to assert their identity, which is absolutely wrong.
So let me ask you a question, which is actually, if I be the devil's advocate,
Yeah.
that if the majority of Muslims do not consider Aurangzeb to be a cult figure or a hero, then what is the harm of accepting the Hindu demand for handing over the mosque and convert it to a temple?
No, there is
Why
actually
the sense of sadness?
no. There are two parts of this question.
Yes.
First part is very clear that, oh, okay, Aurangzeb destroyed the mosque. But the
Right.
second part is that Aurangzeb is not a historical figure here. Aurangzeb is a political figure. That's the point I'm making.
Right.
Aurangzeb is a political figure. So whatsoever Aurangzeb did, he was not an individual who actually demolished the temple. There were
Right.
other people involved in that. And if you disrespect, if you establish a link between Aurangzeb and the present day Muslim, you will also have to establish a link between Hindus of those time, powerful Hindu elite of those time, and the Hindus of the present generation. It means that you are saying that the Hindus of that time were supporting Aurangzeb to destroy the temple, and they were silent. What does it mean? Yesterday, I attended a very interesting book discussion in which I came to know that actually during Mughal India, financiers, the bankers, they used to give loans to kings all the time. And
Right.
during the time, Aurangzeb destroyed a temple in Gujarat. Why? Because that particular temple was the Kul Devta temple of a banker. And that banker did not give money to Aurangzeb to fight against his brother. Instead, he gave money to his brother. So, in
Okay.
order to take revenge, he demolished that temple. But because the war was going on, Shah Jahan immediately ordered that this temple must be rebuilt, etc. And he gave money and land again to rebuild that temple. What does it mean? It means that the past is very complicated. But if you want to reduce that
Mhm.
past to the present, it would become very difficult. It means that you are saying that the Hindus of that time were actually coward. You are saying that Hindus of that time were collaborating with Aurangzeb because Aurangzeb was just an individual. He had
Right.
all the support given to him by non-Muslims. What does it mean? If you categorically divide the past into Hindu and Muslim, it would become very, very difficult. So therefore, we live in India, which is a democratic country, which has got a constitution and law. So therefore, any sort of mosque temple issues must
Mm.
be decided on the basis of secular law. And
That's
that's
right.
the reason why it is different from the medieval, tit for tat kind of justice. It is not, because we are living in a modern society which is based
Right.
on certain principles.
Now, you have said, that it should be mosque temple dispute should be on the basis of secular law. Let me pick up one law which has been in existence from the early 90s onwards, which a large number of Indians felt. Even the Supreme Court, in its judgment of 2019 in the Ayodhya case, said that the Places of Worship Act is actually now a part of the basic structure of the Constitution, and that it is going to be a permanent bulwark against any further similar kind of ideas which are there. As far as what happened to the Babri Masjid, demolished it and built a temple there. The next mosque which is going to come up in the Dhanipur village, not a single brick has been laid. Anyway, that's a separate matter. We'll talk about it if we get the time. Places of Worship Act. I will ask a personal question. I felt, that when it was championed by a large number of secularists, it was also somehow or the other accepting the basic Hindutva or the Hindutva battalion, which is the Sangh Parivar, their position, their demand on Ayodhya, that this is a mosque which was demolished, which demolished temple, and it must now be removed, taken away wherever they want to, and a temple should be built there. So the moment the Places of Worship Act separated Ayodhya and said that this will be sorted out by negotiations or various other means or by the legal process, uh, it will be applicable to the others. The Places of Worship Act has come into play again in the Varanasi, in the Gyanvapi Mosque case. It's been interpreted very wrongly at certain times by the Supreme Court. I'm not going to be getting into it because it's a very complicated issue. But how do you look at the problematic nature of the Places of Worship Act?
Actually, first of all, I think I would like to evoke Ambedkar. Ambedkar said something very, very interesting in Constituent Assembly. He said that now we have made a beautiful constitution, but this constitution would only function if we have a society that can actually support to that constitution. It means that if you have a law, you require a public opinion in that sense that the spirit of the law can adequately be implemented. So that we have to remember that. Now, making laws won't solve problems because you require good society and that too good political willingness. So I think the problem, first of all, there are two technical problems with the Places of Worship Act 1991.
Right.
And I wrote my book in early 2000, and I mentioned that this law is actually problematic. But because that time it was not
You're talking about your previous book.
my first book that came
Yes.
out in 2014. It is
Yes.
called Muslim Political Discourse in Post-Colonial India. That second edition is going to come out in
Yeah.
2025. So I highlighted two problems of this act. First of all, one problem you have identified, and you said that it said that it is not applicable on Ram Janambhoomi Babri Masjid dispute. The second problem is that it is not applicable also on protected historical monuments.
Hmm.
It means that if a building is protected by Archaeological Survey of India, you can certainly raise the question, or you can certainly question the religious nature of that building, and that's the reason why, and that's a technical flaw. Because if you when you say protected monument, there is no one kind of protected monument in India. In fact, there are three ways in which a monument would become a national monument of national importance. One is
Important.
if a dead building is acquired by ASI,
Hmm.
and that building would be used as a dead monument because the ASI won't allow any religious practice to happen inside that building.
Right.
The second possibility is that the ASI would get into an agreement with a functional mosque or a temple, and the ASI will take care of the outer part, the building part, but not the religious
Not
activities,
the not the
going inside it.
ceremony rituals inside.
Yes. The third is that if a building is in use partly for religious purposes, that portion would be separated out, but the remaining portion would be protected by the ASI. But you have to take the permission of ASI to conduct the rituals inside that very building.
Right.
So these are the three things by which you can declare a building a protected monument of national importance or a state importance, etc. Now, in if you look at the existing debates on, say, for instance, Gyanvapi, or if, for instance, you say very recently there is a PIL asking Jama Masjid must be declared a protected historical monument. What does
Right.
it mean? The moment you get ASI into it, the 1991 Act would become completely irrelevant. Because if it would become a monument of any kind, monument of state importance or monument of national importance, ASI Protection of Places of Worship Act will not be applicable on those buildings which are actually under the
So
protection of ASI.
so that
So
law will
you
not
need
be
to
able
get
to
into, yeah.
prevent the change of its character.
Yes. So you can certainly, if the moment ASI get into the picture, it would become very, very complicated, legally speaking. So that is actually the reason why now ASI is doing something, something very strange. There are two things we must remember with regard to archaeology. One is
Hmm.
excavation. You excavate, you dig
Right.
into building and find out what exactly there in order to enrich your understanding of the past. But there is equally important practice to protect the existing structure.
Right.
What the colonial archaeology did with us, they actually made in Indian context these two mode of doing archaeology, the conservation as well as excavation, problematic, because that sustained the argument that again, beneath every Muslim building there is a temple. Why?
Right.
Because we do not look at archaeologically the relationship between excavation and conservation. So there is a need to actually rethink the political aspect of archaeology in the country. And ASI, but I would also like to mention this, that ASI has been doing a temple survey since 1950s. We
Hmm.
also have to remember that it was H.T. Sankalia who
Hmm.
started, exploring Mahabharat and Ramayana sites
Yes.
in India way before, and that was during the time of Nehru, way before Hindutva politics
Right.
came into existence. What does it mean? It means that the places of worship, now coming back to the Places of Worship Act, that we must remember these technicalities are important, because most of the time our
Hmm.
political observers actually do not look at the legal technicalities, but the
Right.
politicians of our country are smart enough to understand how to use law in order to create an political discourse.
Right. You know, we can, of course, continue to discuss this entire issue and the state of the Muslims endlessly. We will possibly, end up spending hours and hours talking. But let me move on to one final point which I want to touch base with you, which is actually very critical. We have talked about history, the past. We have talked about the physical attacks which are happening at the moment. Let us now also talk about something which is what is Muslim society.
Hmm.
The average Indian the non-Muslim Indian, let me frame it that way,
Mhm.
thinks that every Muslim is just one lot. They look at the Muslims as a homogeneous community. But when you go and start analyzing, look at the Muslim society more carefully, journalists like me who began looking at this for the last over the last 4 decades. The beginning, every Muslim society appeared to be one huge cement block. But as our understanding of Muslim society grew, we realized that there had been a certain kind of, for want of any other word, I'll use the word Indianization of Islam in India.
Mm,
So we find that there is caste in Muslims in India.
mm,
That if you actually look at it, there is no singular political behavior to actually justify us endlessly using this phrase Muslim vote ban. I do not know the number of times it would have been actually, been used by the media in India. We can
mm.
possibly do a Google search and you're going to find, 1800 crore hits might come out. It is a very fragmented society. It is also very diverse. There is different kind of political opinion. There is different social hierarchy. Despite that, when it comes to being targeted, at that point, the Muslim becomes one by the people who are targeted. The guys who are the people who are leading the Hindutva battalion, whether in Uttarkashi who have attacked the mosque,
Mm,
or what they are claiming in Chamoli, or what is happening any other place. We can go on endlessly about various attacks taking place. They do not look at what is the caste, what is the economic profile, and what is the academic background of that person. For them, it only matters that this person is a Muslim. As you said, that you yourself, when going in a metro, not looking to be a Muslim, despite that, if you use a word which is used more often by Muslims, then you get targeted and you get identified again as a single block.
mm,
Isn't this a peculiar contradiction that at one level there is a tremendous amount of diversity, at
mm.
the other level, when being targeted, it's all being seen as one single homogeneous block? How does one negotiate this contradiction?
This is actually a fascinating question, and thank you very much for asking me this question. In the book, I have tried to answer this question. In fact, the book starts with an incident when CRPF, not RPF, the
Railway control.
railway constable actually killed four people.
That's
They
right.
looked like Muslim, and he didn't know them, and he just went and then he fired them, and four of them died. Now, they're basically, you know, they're two aspect of they're basically two inseparable constraint of Muslimness in India. One is which I called substantive Muslimness. Substantive Muslimness meaning, for example, a person has got many identities. So I would be a Muslim, obviously, but I would be an academic, I would be a male, I would be a Dailyite, I would be a teacher, and things like that. And I will have a caste, I will speak a particular kind of Urdu. I went to a DAV school, so my Hindi is actually much better than my Urdu,
That's right.
etc. So that would constitute a Muslim in a variety of ways, and that's what I call substantive Muslimness. But there is another kind of Muslimness, and that is called discourse of Muslimness, where all Muslims would become, for example, a religious minority, constitutionally recognized religious minority, a member of a pan Islamic world, a member of an Indian Muslim religious community, a statistical category in census, etc. So there is a very interesting, and it depends on context which kind of Muslimness actually going to determine the reflection in day-to-day life. For example, this incident when this person actually went and identified four Muslim-looking people and killed them, he was under the influence of the discourse of Muslimness, where Muslims were actually seen as an enemy of Hindus and, for that matter, India. But suppose if this person would start a conversation with them, he would get to know them that they are actually quite like I'm just assuming that suppose this constable who killed them actually
Hmm.
went and talked to them about their journey, and the conversation would start. The constable as well as those who died might have reached to a some kind of a conversation level where they would realize that actually they belong to very similar class, very similar social world, etc. What does it mean? It means that the discourse of Muslimness is so powerful at the moment that the substantive Muslimness has somehow reduced to margin. And that is the reason, that is the problem. The problem is that, for example, look at what was happening in 2010s when the discourse of inclusiveness was very powerful, not Hindutva. Inclusiveness and exclusion, social justice, these were the key terms of 2010s. And at
Right.
that point of time, it was actually acceptable to talk about Paswanda Muslims. It was
Right.
acceptable to talk about marginalization of Dalit Muslims. And, it was natural at that point of time that this discourse of marginalization is accepted by the society as a whole. But things changed. Now the dominant discourse is driven by Hindutva, where Muslims were seen as a problem. And that
Hmm.
discourse somehow forced us to get rid of the everydayness. And that's why, people often, when you go to, I had a friend and my wife's friend. So we used to go to their place, and the auntie and she, they were very staunch Jansang. They were actually migrated from Pakistan during the partition, etc. And this family was completely Jansang than BJP. So the auntie would always say that you do not look like Muslim.
Hmm.
Why? Because the manner you start conversation, the substantive Muslimness started unfolding.
Hmm.
Because why she would say that you do not like Muslim? Because the discourse of Muslimness is very different than the everydayness of Muslimness, and
Hmm.
that's why the substantive Muslimness need to be highlighted. And that's
Hmm.
the reason why we started our conversation with the idea of social, because the people in the society who actually stopped a Muslim person and forced him to shout Jai Shri Ram, because they
Hmm.
were the influence of that discourse of Muslimness. Suppose they would start a conversation, thing would have become very, very different. So therefore, the point which I made initially was similar, that there is a need to actually try to reinvent possibilities where substantive Muslimness can become more powerful discourse in order to actually avoid this totalizing debate between Hindus and Muslims.
Right. You know, let's talk about that. What are the options in front of the average common Muslim today? What are the choices open in front? I'm not talking about somebody like you who, one, does not look like a Muslim, and secondly, you have a completely different set of tools to be able to navigate through the problems and the isolation which you actually face. But how does an common Muslim navigate the path in society today?
If you go to any Muslim locality, you find that people have understood the logic of politics and the manner in which Hindutva has become the dominant discourse of social life as well. And that's the reason why Muslims are actually in search of various survival strategies. And this is not something which is very new for them. It has happened in 1950s, immediately after the partition,
After
when
partition.
things were very, very bad. And that's why, the book, which the recent book, I have tried to conclude the book with a scene from my favorite film, Garm Hawa. And by the way, I'm not very fond of the person who is the role played by Balraj Sahni in the film. I am more interested in his son. This son knows that he has to survive in this environment. And there is a procession going on against unemployment, etc. And he
That's
joins
right.
the protest. What does it mean? It means that the expand of politics need to be the nature of Muslim politics need to be expanded, and try to understand the fact that actually there are certain problems which affect everyone. For example, unemployment, for example, poverty, price rise. These are things which are affecting everyone. And if
As they say,
Muslim,
roti, kapda, or makan issues.
absolutely. So, and Muslims are aware of this. And
Yes.
during the election, I went to different places, and in fact, this is something which came out in our survey as well. That what are the Muslim issues? Roti, kapda, makan. But when I went and I talked to during my ethnographic fieldwork, I visited number of constituency during this election. I came to know that Muslim would say, no, 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 we do not want to talk about mosque, etc. We would like to talk about the developmental issues. What does it mean? It is also a survival strategy. You have to create, support base, and this support base should come from the society, not from political parties. That's the reason why Muslim voting has always been rather fragmented. If you look at CSDS data, you find that still Muslims are not going to vote as an en bloc. Why? Because they know that what is going to happen at the constituency level. So therefore, there are different survival strategies Muslims are looking for, and they are very much interested in creating harmony at the social level. Now, unfortunately, the secularists, especially the political party, secular political party, and this is the complaint which I argued more powerfully in my book, that they do not provide any platform where you can have Hindu and Muslim come together and talk to each other. And that's
Right.
why there is an open field for RSS and Hindutva affiliated organization to propagate very, 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 very subtle and very problematic notion of nationalism. So there is a need to reclaim the social, and that social would contribute to a very different imagination of national. I'm very hopeful because I have seen people at the grassroots level. They are doing, and that's why, not merely the incident you narrated in the beginning. Look also what happened in Shimla. People came out and said that we do not want this, obviously. So, one thing which actually I think RSS has understood, not BJP. RSS has understood the fact that if there is a limit to radical Hindutva,
Limit to hatred.
the hatred, yes, radical Hindutva or hatred, there is
Yes.
a limit to it. And that's why, which is very important to note, that if you go back to say 1990s, RSS people would make very provocative argument, and the BJP people would come and try to balance them, those
Yes.
statements. But things have changed now.
Now the
BJP
roles are
leaders
reversed.
would make, yes, reverse. BJP leader would make provocative argument, and the RSS people would come and try to create certain balance. Why? Because RSS is fully aware of the fact that there is a possibility that this hatred-led radical Hindutva might get to a saturation point, and it would become very difficult for BJP to actually revive itself as a political party if that happens.
I think that's well put, that our hope actually lies in the fact that this politics of hatred and this politics of Islamophobia, which has been going on for the past 10 years and even more, let's not put everything
Yes,
as of
yes,
the beginning starting point as 2014. The decline has been there for a much longer period.
yeah.
But, that if it becomes counterproductive, that is where actually, our hope lies. Thank you very much and congratulations once again on this book. I must tell you that Garam Hawa also happens to be my favorite film.
I know that.
Uh, Slightly differently, that for me, the character of Salim Mirza, which is played by Balraj Sahni, is also very important because, after all, it is he from who the son asked for permission to join a flag which is obviously a red flag. That's a
Yes,
flag of the working class. He joins that.
yeah,
And eventually, even the character of Balraj Sahni joins that procession. My
yes, yes,
point is that I would not want any Muslim of contemporary India to think that their forefathers, like Balraj Sahni, like Farooq Sheikh, took a wrong decision. They should have gone away when time and opportunity was available for them during partition. That is why I say the importance of that film, and that is the hope that I will continue to live with and fight for. That we all have to collectively fight that none of today's Muslims should feel that way. Thank you very much, Hilal Ahmed, for
Thank you.
coming and speaking to me. I'm sorry if I became a bit emotional to the
No, no.
viewers and also to you towards the end. But I think this is a very painful period and a painful set of events that we are actually seeing. Thank you very much.